Hey, what's up? Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of SimplyPodLogical, a simply Nailogical podcast. Cristine, welcome back.
Guess who's back? Back again.
Cristine took a nail art vacation last week.
A nail art hiatus.
Hiatus, sabbatical. We had Derek on. We did financial advice. Thank you, Derek, the Sandman, for joining us.
I had so many reactions to that podcast that I wish I was there.
Were you a little upset? Upset at us?
There was things I could have added, from my POV, but it's fine.
Do you want to add it right now?
No. No. I'm past it. I'll just leave it in the comment section. How's that?
Okay, please. Yeah, please. You can criticize me there. But yeah, this week there was a video published on YouTube about a week ago that we both came across, got recommended to us, that we thought was kind of interesting on a personal level, and that could lead to some interesting discussion. And we thought that could be interesting to share on the podcast. And that's a video by Dan Howell. You may know him as the Dan of the Dan and Phil YouTube group. Duo.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He's a big YouTuber.
Giant YouTuber. So yeah, for some context here, like Dan and Phil, and Dan specifically, they were like enormous YouTubers. He was a really enormous YouTuber around the same time that you, I think, sort of became popular.
Like 2016.
Very much of that sort of like 2016-ish era of YouTubers.
Yeah.
There was also sort of like this weird thing where there are a bunch of like sort of British YouTubers that became hugely popular
He was
around
also
that time too.
way popular before I was popular, but sorry,
Yeah.
I just want to make that clear. Like he was definitely, he's been on YouTube for like a decade or something, but I remember when I first got big on 2016, he was also like a large YouTuber because we had crossover audience.
Yeah. So how do I put this? Like his fan base was extremely dedicated and vocal. So like the same way people now sort of talk about like BTS comments showing up like in random places on the internet, they were sort of known for having a fan base that would similarly be like all over the place. I'm not saying this is a criticism, but it's just to give you an indication of like
The level
how
of fame.
popular they were. Because I think Dan and Phil were kind of as popular as you can get on YouTube without breaking through to the mainstream, maybe. Because I think if you went up to some random like 25-year-old woman on the street, they probably don't know who Dan and Phil are. But he had like millions and millions of fans.
YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? Yeah, there was. Yeah, BTS, I guess, is just different because like people see BTS on the Tonight Show, right? I just think that they had like that YouTube fame that's like as famous as you can get on YouTube without being just like worldwide famous, is how I kind of want to frame it. Do you think that's fair? Okay, so Dan published a video very recently just saying, it's titled what? Why I Quit YouTube, right?
Yeah.
It's a 90-minute video essay, a very personal thing. Want to be sensitive that like our goal here isn't to like criticize it. Like he's just talking about his experience. It's more just his sort of perspective on the sort of emotional toll of being a creator, his sort of aspirations beyond YouTube, his relationship with YouTube. We found ourselves kind of constantly, as we were watching it, we were thinking about our sort of own experiences in this space.
It's an interesting thing to watch from the perspective of being a YouTuber because you have maybe similar or different experiences that you can reflect on in the same way. So we found ourselves being very reflexive watching his commentary and experience, and he was extremely open in sharing that with his audience. And I guess the crux of it is he made that video after 2 years of not publishing a video. So during that period of being off or like not publishing on his main, it's not like he was completely disappeared, but during that period of being off, there was, of course, conspiracies, comments, where is he, what's he doing, what's the problem, but like, is he fallen off? Like, then this is just what happens amongst fan bases when they feel like their creator has deviated from past behaviors of publishing. So I also found myself like being reflexive on that. Yeah. So I really think like Dan's new video made me think a lot about myself and my experience on the internet. And so that's why we're having this conversation. It's not about, picking apart Dan's story. His story is his story. But I am just going to share like my point of view on some of the topics that he brought up because I think that it's interesting and I think that our audience likes hearing when we're just open and honest about the experience of what it's like being in this position on a YouTuber, because while so many of you see it, you observe it all the time, few of you have the experience on the other end of living in that for years. So that's
Yeah.
what we're here to offer.
And I don't know if there's anything to disclose here. I'm not very familiar with Dan's content, just to be honest. I feel a bit of an affinity just in the sense that he was sort of, you were both big YouTubers of a certain generation, I want to say. So I think there's like some connection there. I think I very briefly met him, but I'm not saying you know him, but you hung out with him one time, I think.
I went out for sushi with him and Phil and Sophia and Tyler and my sister at VidCon.
Yeah, okay.
There is a photo somewhere of all of us, though. I think, or maybe you were taking the picture.
No, I don't think.
Or were you in the picture? I can't remember. But there is a photo of the group of us at VidCon. So yes, I have met them and spent like a couple hours hanging out with them.
My only real memory, I think I briefly said hello, but like at a VidCon event, we were sort of behind the scenes and I was getting some shots of you and Sophia backstage. And you guys went up and said hello to Dan and Phil. And I guess from a distance, I like had tried to get a shot of that.
Yeah.
And their manager came over and wasn't very happy with me. So that's my one.
Probably thought you were like a random fan. So
it was like a YouTuber only event. Okay, I get it. We don't have to get into that. I thought that was a little strange. A lot of people were there without like handlers, but they were a really big deal.
yes.
Anyway, so Dan's video, why I quit YouTube. It's really a video in two parts. The first part is very reminiscent of any video you may have ever heard about a YouTuber talking about YouTube burnout. So, yeah, a lot of similar themes there. I thought the second half was actually way more interesting about his experience of after he basically decided he didn't want to make the YouTube content he was known for, his sort of him trying to basically create a show with YouTube and how that didn't go the way he wanted it to. But like, there's a bunch of different things we could pull out all over the place here. We could start at the beginning.
Kind of the beginning. He brought up topics about like why people started YouTube when he started, and then the pressure to monetize your hobbies. And I thought that was a really interesting discussion because he was part of that class of YouTube who started when there was no money to be made. And I was somewhat around that era, but like people had started making money in 2014, but it wasn't well known. So I didn't know when I started making YouTube videos that you could even turn on AdSense.
Sure.
I didn't know what that was.
You were at like the very sort of end of that window of people knowing like you could make a lot of money by having popular content.
Yeah, so I absolutely appreciate like his perspective was that he started this because it was fun. Like he had fun making skits, like short skits of comedy. And it was a way for him to send like funny videos to his friends at the time. And then random people on the internet started enjoying it. And it was a type of art or creativity that he enjoyed. And I feel the same way. For the reasons why I started, I was looking for a creative outlet while I was doing my master's thesis and also coming home from work. And I wanted to do something fun. And I always loved nail art. And then I posted those pictures on the internet. And then people said, can you make a video? And I'm like, where do I put the video? Instagram only allows 15-second videos at the time. So I was like, oh, YouTube, you can upload longer videos. So I made minute-long videos of my nail art. Didn't know about monetization. I think it took me like 6 to 8 months after posting 1-minute videos or so to learn that you could turn it on. So I was definitely relating to him in the sense that when you're on a platform and like you know why you started, because it was just to share your passion and like you love doing it, and you know you weren't doing it explicitly for money, when that culture shift changed and people learned that people can make money on YouTube, there was all of a sudden an influx of people joining the platform with the primary goal to make money. I'm not saying that they also didn't have a passion for whatever topic they were sharing. That's both can be true at once, but it changes the culture and it makes the people who started on there like absolutely definitely not for the money. They feel like everything is changing and it's maybe not for the best. And I can kind of relate to that, but I don't want to also demonize anyone who realizes that like, oh my God, I can make money off of my passions. Like that is kind of one of the goals that so many people look for in life. So you can't be too mad at it. But I also acknowledge that that probably contributed to a large culture shift for a lot of the OG creators who are like, what is happening? And then the pressure, as Dan was also kind of explaining, to monetize your hobbies. That if you aren't making enough content, it's not as clickbaity, you're not optimizing your hobbies, all of a sudden you start to look at your creativity as just a product for profit. And that can fuck with how you feel about doing those hobbies.
Yeah, I think a really like easy example or a relatable one is just like anyone who streams playing video games on the internet, for example, or posts gameplay videos. That sounds great. It's like, hey, I could just get paid money to play video games on the internet, right? Yeah. But if video games are just something you love doing just as like a personal activity, it's a very different thing to do that for an audience, in front of an audience. And this really applies to any hobby. It can really take some of the joy out of it, potentially, depending on the kind of person you are. I do want to say, like, I think you're totally right, but I do think this kind of gets oversimplified, right? I don't think it's as simple as like early YouTubers were just doing it for the art of creating videos in their bedroom, right? I think a lot of people did have ambitions of wanting to be famous. I think Dan even sort of admits that, like he sort of dreamed of being an actor or something,
he did
right?
say he wanted to be an actor,
Yeah, so like a lot of that early YouTube days, it's people didn't know they could make millions of dollars necessarily just from YouTube, the way a lot of YouTubers now do. And YouTube even puts out press releases occasionally being like, this many of our creators made over $1 million this year, because they like sort of advertising the fact that a lot of people have done really well financially. So yeah, it's not as simple as like I was just a geeky kid making videos in my bedroom, right?
He also talked about the time when he was accepted into the YouTube partner program, which just made me think about when that happened to me. And I had such a different experience. Like it's so long ago, and it's like probably someone who doesn't even work there anymore. So it's absolutely not a reflection of like, you know, all YouTube partner managers. But I just have this vivid memory of sitting at my kitchen table in the condo, if you guys recall my old set. My MacBook.
Your set or home?
My home, but like it was also a set because I filmed part of my videos at the kitchen table too. I sat there and I had a Mac that was taking up the whole kitchen table because I needed like a big Mac to edit all the footage. And I had one conversation with YouTube partner manager who reached out to me and was like, hey, I work with YouTube. And like there was a human emailing me from YouTube, which had never happened. I'm just like, what? Like there's people who work there? Like, I mean, that's stupid. But like, I never thought I'd have the privilege of like speaking to a human. So a human emailed me and said, let's set up a call and talk about your YouTube career and your channel. And I was like, what? Like, I kind of got nervous because at the time, like, remember, I was like just finished my master's degree. I was trying to get a full-time job, or maybe I'd just gotten a full-time job at Statistics Canada. I can't remember the timing. I might have been still at corrections, but I was heavily like into my career as a crime statistics analyst and just fresh out of school. YouTube was like it was my side project. It was what I did later at home for fun. And then I get an email from a guy saying like, let's talk about your career. And your YouTube career. Yeah. And I had a phone call with him. And he just starts like showing me decks, showing me metrics, showing me how I can optimize CPMs. And this is when I'm just starting to learn about what those terms even mean. CPMs is cost per milli. It's basically like a way to say how much money you're making per view. And I'm like learning about this. I mean, obviously I'm interested. I'm like, I'm making money doing this. So yes, tell me. I don't understand. This is new to me. I didn't have any friends in YouTube at the time. Like I didn't know who to ask. Yeah. But it was like this industry guy from YouTube telling me, here's your career trajectory on YouTube. Let's get you this. We're going to get you to this many subscribers. Like, here's what you can do for brands. And I was like extremely nervous and kind of off-put by that phone call because it almost made me feel like this is the default decision that people would make. Like he was presenting it like, why don't you want to be a full-time YouTuber? I even told him, I remember being on the call and being like, I have a job.
So let's be clear though. I think this is before the partner program.
No, this was the first, but this
No,
person didn't
this was
last long.
through. Yeah, sorry. There's some nuance here. I'm not sure how much we want to, because you originally had a contact at like YouTube Canada, who was just. We
This
had a
was
bit of.
before that. This is not someone you would remember. Like I think I
Maybe
had
I
like
wasn't
one,
involved with.
This was like one phone call conversation.
I remember we had had a couple contacts at YouTube for a while, and we felt like they weren't super helpful. And then you
And then I
became
got a
part of
helpful
like
one.
the creator program that a lot of like the bigger creators are a part of, where you have like a dedicated
But I thought
person.
Okay, I might be mistaken. I don't remember
think
that.
so.
I don't remember their title, but a person from YouTube specifically reached out and had a phone call with me about how to optimize my channel.
Yeah.
And I remember being like, I can't do everything you're saying I should do because like I have a job. And I remember him just being like, why? like it was such a weird moment for me.
It's certainly a privilege to be able to speak to a human being at YouTube. But yeah, at first it was because like there was someone at first where it's like, hey, we hear people are going to like certain YouTube events, and we were like, oh, could you go to one of those? I remember this sort of came up once. And someone had told us like, oh, Canadian creators don't go to that.
Oh, yeah.
And then we see the event and there's a bunch of Canadian creators there. Do you remember that?
I remember that.
We had a bit of a weird experience with one of our contacts there at one point. But
that was very early on though.
very early. But anyway, so Dan in his video, he says a lot of things that are critical about YouTube. But I want to give him credit for this and acknowledge this. He says like the best thing about YouTube is having real people you can deal with if you're in a position to have if you have a channel that can justify them having that human contact for you, a partner manager. And those people, in our experience, do genuinely care about the platform.
Yeah, and let me just be incredibly clear. In my past few years on YouTube, everyone we've dealt with personally on YouTube projects or my partner managers has been absolutely amazing, understanding. I feel like they've always listened to all my concerns if I had any, and they've been truly incredible. But I'm also fortunate to have been in such a position to get a partner manager assigned to me, because not all YouTubers get that. Like, I guess you have to meet a certain threshold where they decide, okay, you're in this tier now, we're going to give you one. I was merely just giving my like very early experience with the first person from YouTube, because I feel like it does reflect that culture shift that Dan was talking about, where it was a pressure to monetize your hobbies. And that's what I felt like. But I'm sure this person didn't look at it like that. He's like, this is my job. Why wouldn't you want to optimize your channel? But it was like me being like, wait, what am I doing here? Like, is this the goal? Is the goal to be a YouTube creator? Do I need to quit my job? Like, I felt like that was kind of the indirect underlying assumption. Obviously they didn't say that, but just that's the feeling I got.
Yeah. I've never like we will have meetings with YouTube even recently where they're giving you, I don't want to say guidance, because at the end of the day I feel like they're very respectful of like, it's your channel, you're doing what you want to do, right? But they are willing to offer resources and talk to you about things like which of your videos are doing better than others, or what kind of content seems to do well on your channel. And we've had conversations with people at YouTube about that for you and your content. And yeah, it's like you could take that and just be strategic and make what they're suggesting does well, or you could just make the content you feel
You
like,
want.
right? So it's not like you have to, because like this is a criticism you hear about YouTube a lot. I think
We could
Dan
talk about
brought
the
this up.
creator studio.
Exactly.
Let's talk about that.
You log into the back end of your YouTube and it'll tell you like, hey, your latest video is doing great, or your latest video is performing below average. And I've heard a lot of creators complain about this, that it's like, this is bad for me and my mental health. And like, I'm not saying that isn't true, but it's like, would you prefer you didn't get that information? Like, there are people who have channels who treat it like a business, who are looking at it strategically, that are trying to grow, they want to be successful. That data is very useful to them and can be very useful to anyone making content. If you are sensitive to that and it's going to hurt your feelings and your self-concept, you could basically ignore your metrics.
You can always ignore your metrics.
But I think it's really bizarre to criticize YouTube, the platform, because they're willing to show you data on how well your videos are or aren't doing on some benchmark or compared to each other.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting one. And we are absolutely biased in being data-driven people because of our years spent in running data. Like, so we don't personalize data on, like, because we see it all the time, right? So for us, it's easy to see like metrics, like this one saying it's 1 out of 10, what percentile, what's the like to dislike ratio. We're like, yeah. Like we understand it, first of all, like, and we can look at the detailed analytics. And then we can also decide we don't need to use that information to inform our choices on content if we want. But I think it's because we're just used to being delivered performance metrics, seeing dashboards. Like, it's something we've worked with for a decade. I think if you're a creator who does not have experience in that, and all of a sudden you're being presented with metrics about you, it's trickier to not personalize it because it is inherently so personal. Of course, for me, it's personal. They're telling me, oh, this stream is doing worse than all your other ones. But I also know this is just how data works. I'm gonna find this information somehow. And if it's really just a question of presentation, then are people who saying that they don't like when it says like 10 out of 10 is your video, meaning like it's the 10th worst out of the last 10 videos you did. Are they just asking for a different presentation? Are they just asking for YouTube not to show you that? So you'd have to like drill down deeper to find that information? Because a lot of people do just want to know that information. I just want to be sensitive to the fact that some people don't look at it as data first. They look at it as a self-report, as a performance report on them first, as opposed to like, this is literally just the data and you may choose what to do with it.
Yeah, but like, think of you, right? Like, you're not, we will pay attention to the data, but that's not how you're driving your decisions.
Yeah.
We know what the data says. You would be doing things very differently right now if all you cared about was getting the most views possible.
I'd be making toy review videos on the main channel if I wanted
we
to.
We would have a kid and we'd force them to be on YouTube and make a family channel. We would get married, have a
child, get 7 dogs. Like.
But even in more minor ways, like, you know, we know the baking streams do really well. We could do more of those, but we don't really want to do more than we're currently doing.
Yeah, it doesn't really fit as much into our desired content schedule in terms of, you know, like, I'd like to do more stuff on my own on stream. You have your own stream, so we're not going to do baking streams every single week.
Yeah, sure. But just to say, it's not some like groundbreaking, like completely change your content. Sometimes it's just like, hey, this type of content does a little bit of better with newer viewers, or, you know, like, these are useful things to know. And it kind of bothers me when I hear people complaining about
But
this.
it's complaining because, honestly, I think it's just not having that background experience in working with data. Like, we see data all the time and we understand how it's used to inform policy or legislation or whatever.
These people understand numbers, Cristine.
But there's a difference between knowing that can happen and doing it every day in your job. Like, you've created how many performance reports or dashboards or key metrics, key performance indicators, like, all the time. So we're so used to that it's easier for us not to personalize it. I really think
I don't know if it's our experience that does it, but I think maybe that is the core of the problem, right? And this whole conversation about YouTuber burnout, to me, it's not so much burnout. I think a lot of people sort of conflate or confuse this idea that YouTuber burnout comes from like how hard it is to do all the work that is being a creator, when really I think the burnout is a product of how your self-concept gets tied into putting yourself on the internet. So I think that gets confused. And I think even Dan there's some gray area here. I can't remember exactly how he put it, but a lot of creators who've talked about burnout will refer to this idea that like, I had to make content all the time to keep up with the algorithm. And I felt all this pressure. And like, sometimes they frame it as if they're just working a lot and that's why they're burnt out. I feel like that's so tone deaf and it's like not right. A lot of people work a lot. You know, YouTubers aren't unique in needing to produce something every week necessarily, if that's sort of the schedule you put on yourself. I really think the burnout comes from, and I'm really empathetic and sensitive to this, I think the burnout is a product of conflating your own perception of yourself and self-worth based on how people receive your content.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we can go down that road and then unpack why there's different impacts on people who are in the public eye in terms of burnout and how that's different than like work burnout, which everyone who works a job experiences. But I just want to reiterate, like I did find a lot of what Dan said about his interpretation of his experience of burnout. Like I found, like I agreed with him. Like he said on YouTube, it feels like there's no break, there's no downtime. It's indefinite. It's a train you're always on. There's never not a good time to make content. Like it's not like a series with seasons that have an end, right?
It could be though. See, like I think like even this is
sorry,
wrong.
Can I?
Okay,
let
you
me
can
just.
go
I just
on.
want to reiterate because there is. I'm not saying there is truth to what he's saying, but
Yes.
and then we'll unpack. The highest CPM, like where you make the most money from ads, is in December, which is usually a time when normal people take vacation, see their family take time off because Christmas holidays. So every time is a great time to make content, and then the audience is always asking for more. No matter how much you do, no matter what you're doing, even if you're putting out the most content, they're like, "This is great, do more." So while I agree with all of that, but I also feel like people in so many industries and jobs feel the same way, because even if you work a job that technically has a clock out, you you might be in a position where you're trying to get up to the next ladder, or maybe you're a shift worker, or maybe you're a temporary worker, and you know that like there's an end date to your contract, and so you're constantly looking for work or trying to do more work or trying to take more initiative so your boss will recognize you, and you feel like even if there's technically a timeout like clock, you're trying to do more. And then the problem is, you look at famous YouTubers who are saying that they're burnt out from working, if we're just saying it's work because of working, and your work doesn't get you anywhere near the same reward. And I think that's been something frustrating that I absolutely observe amongst audiences who kind of like see an issue with YouTubers who are complaining about burnout, who are arguably millionaires, when they do have control to take time off, like what you were just saying. You don't have to post Vlogmas all December.
Yeah.
You could not do that. Yes, it's tough for anyone to be like, I'll just give up several $100,000 and not do Vlogmas. But also, like, you'll be okay if you choose to prioritize your mental health and just not do that. And other people who work all the time and feel like they can't take vacations, or there's no paid vacations or no paid leave at their job, are like, what the fuck?
Yeah. So I really feel it's overstated, this idea of it being like the constant churn of having to make content. I don't think your typical YouTuber works harder or more than a lot of people who work very hard for a lot less money, potentially, right?
Yeah.
Again, I think it really just comes down more to that mental aspect. If you're putting something out into the world, especially the kind of content you make, right? Because I think Dan and you are in like still in kind of like this 2016 idea of what it means to be a YouTuber in some ways. You are just like products of like that sort of generation of YouTubers, where a lot of the content is just sort of personality based. Like, yes, you had like nail art, you were doing tutorials and stuff, but people were mostly watching you because
Entertainment
they
videos, yeah.
liked hanging out with you, is sort of the sort of feeling I think
It was like
people
DIY
got.
hacks, parodies. Like that became, what people most enjoyed.
There's a lot of YouTube content now that isn't that. Like, the content doesn't just have to be about people's reception of a personality. So I feel like a lot of this commentary right now is very specific to people who are making content that is very personal. And Dan's content, like, I'm not super familiar, but it is a lot of like
It's more personal.
him sitting in front of a camera
Yeah.
in his bedroom, just speaking to a camera about his thoughts and about himself, right? So when you're receiving feedback and metrics on that, it's not about like, oh, I have to work so hard to constantly produce videos and I have to figure out the lighting myself. It's, hey, if I get a negative comment on this video, that's not just a negative comment about my content or like something that's removed from me. It's really hard not to internalize that comment, I think, when the content you're putting out there is basically just putting yourself up as the product.
Yes, exactly. And I think it's interesting because I feel like the qualitative feedback, meaning comments, have always had a more significant impact on me than the quantitative feedback, meaning like the metrics of how something perform. But I do think there's other YouTubers who voice concerns with like how they don't like how Creator Studio tells them if a video did poorly, are experiencing like absorbing negative feedback from both qualitative and quantitative. And that's probably a compounding effect that makes you feel bad about yourself, especially if your videos are personal and personality based, which like a lot of famous 2016 YouTubers were. It was like about the person, life hacks, let me teach you. Here's more about me. Here's my boyfriend. Here's my cat. Like that's me. But like other people that did their version of that. But speaking of the qualitative feedback, maybe we can talk about that for a bit, because I think this goes to what you were saying about why burnout as a YouTuber is going to be different in context than burnout as, you know, a normal person who doesn't have to work in the public eye. So I guess that's the difference. It's really like everyone works, okay? Just to be incredibly clear, a lot of people work extremely hard, and most people who work extremely hard are not going to get the type of reward for that work like a famous YouTuber does. So just to be incredibly clear. But the difference between being in the public eye and working hard and not being in the public eye and working hard is that the people in the public eye face an insane amount of qualitative feedback that's criticism that never ends. And so while if you're, you know, you're at your job, you're a normal person and you have a boss who might say like this report could be improved, that they're just telling you that because it's workload based. It's not you as a person, or it shouldn't be you as a person, right? Normally speaking.
You might take that a little bit.
You might take that a little bit personally, but you know what to do. Usually, you know how to handle that situation. Usually, or you'll get over it because it was one comment.
You need to learn how to accept criticism about your work.
That's just work. Yeah. But when you have thousands, tens of thousands over the years of comments saying the same thing, saying different things, telling you what to do, telling you what not to do, telling you they didn't like how you did something, how you responded to something.
I like the old you.
I like the old you. Can you go back to this? Why are you doing this? Like, you're a sellout. Don't ignore us. Like, why aren't you responding to me? You didn't take my advice. I want credit for this. There's a constant flow of that even though I try and look at it through the logic of it's not that big of a proportion. So like, first of all, is the feedback significant? Meaning if I'm getting negative comments that are only, representing 1% to 2% of my comments, then I shouldn't put that much weight on it, right? That's what most people would tell you. But it doesn't matter sometimes, because you could see that same negative comment in different spaces floating around the internet. So it's like if I walk into a room and there's only 1% of people saying like, yo, we fucking hate you, that's fine. I can walk out of that room, but then I walk into a different room and there's also 1% of people saying we fucking hate you in this room too. And then I go in another room, and it doesn't matter because you're just left with this effect of people hating you in every room that you visit.
And isn't there just like this sort of psychological principle that we're way more likely to remember
negativity bias.
These sort of, exactly, right? Like you could see 1,000 positive comments, but I'm way more likely to remember that one really negative, shitty one than all the really positive ones. And that just sort of sucks, but that's just sort of the reality of the situation.
Yeah, and I think like if we're comparing this to traditional work, you might experience a negative comment from a coworker or a client or someone, you know, in the work industry, but it might just be one or two people. Like in a certain time period. When you're a famous person, there's potentially thousands of people, even if it's a small percent, because not everything is about proportions. It feels awful to know that there's hundreds of people right now, anytime, like literally right now. There's probably hundreds of
there's
people.
There's someone on a Facebook group right now
that
saying
are
something
upset,
mean.
Disappointed with something that they pulled from the internet, from like I said a sentence a certain way or whatever it was. And that is really hard for most people to deal with. There's some YouTubers or famous people who like seem like they could give a shit, which some people interpret as like strength. I mean, I think it really depends. I don't think that's always true. I think if you're like a decent human, you're going to care on some level that you've disappointed people. And that's always been like I don't want to say problem, but like it feels like it's a problem because I let it get to me sometimes because I never want people to feel disappointed in me. I don't care if you don't like my hair. Let me just rephrase what I mean. Let me define negative comments. And there is a difference. And I think this is a nuance that is misunderstood. There's negative comments that are just mean and stupid. This is my classification. Like, your nails are yellow, your hair is ugly, you have horse girl hair, like, why don't you wear makeup? You look tired. Okay, those are mean and stupid.
They're still shitty, but...
They're shitty, but to me, I categorize them as, like, I laugh for, like, 2 seconds, and I'm like, okay, bye. I don't care. That's me. But then there's comments that express profound disappointment in you and judge you and your character as a person, and I think the intent is like to insult you on a deeper level than just your nails are yellow. And it's those comments of people expressing disappointment with like, I thought you were better than this, I thought you were supposed to be smart, it turns out you're not thinking of us, it must be nice to be so privileged, or other types of comments that are designed to make me feel like I didn't do right by someone, not just that I have an ugly haircut. And it's that bucket of comments that, of course, upsets me because I'm a human. And the last thing I want on earth is to disappoint people or make people feel this way about themselves or the world. And it's those comments that I think are different than hate comments. Because the ones I was just saying are not hate, but they express something more deep.
And there's some nuance here because, like, it's hard to have the right perspective on, like, some of those comments might be legitimate criticism, and it's important to be able to accept legitimate criticism, right? But I think a lot of what you see is just people looking for something to get upset about. I think that's fair to say based on some of the stuff we've seen over the years. It's people who've already made up their minds. They want to find something to be critical about. And they do try to sort of pull at these more sort of like deeper meaning things. And what you were saying before about just like, I think it's really hard for a lot of people to ignore it. And the people who are able to ignore it, like, this is a sweeping generalization. Some people are maybe just better at dealing with others. But like, when you've seen people sort of really sort of shamed, or these sort of bandwagon campaigns on the internet, the people who really take that seriously and personally and want to take responsibility for that are the people who do give a shit about how they are as role models on the platform.
Yeah.
And the people who are like truly uncancelable or whatever are the people who just don't give a shit and welcome the controversy. And hey, people are just talking about me, I don't care what it is. So when you have these like really self-righteous comments about like really trying to criticize someone over things that maybe shouldn't matter so much, or like there just seems to be so much pleasure some people take from criticizing other people. And it seems to me that that's like a really good way of getting good people to feel terrible about themselves and maybe just stop being on the internet. And for truly people who really are worthy of criticism, don't give a shit about those comments because they're just shitty people and they don't mind shitty comments.
I feel that way, and I feel like some of the comments expressing disappointment in like my personal views on how I like to watch movies, for example, have been really disappointing to me, to see that people say they're disappointed in me.
Yeah.
I think it's like a good example because like, why does it matter how I watch movies? But people have been expressing serious sound. I mean, like, I'm just reading the comments. I never know, can't know tone from a comment, but from what I read, people have expressed extreme disappointment in the way I consume movies and suggest I have zero appreciation for, I don't know, certain movie. I don't know. I don't know. But like the way people take so personally, maybe this is the real issue. Like, I'll say what I like to do, what I don't like to do. And it's usually not controversial topics. Like, it's like about just something really innocuous, like how I watch movies or how I don't like to travel. And people will take that and personalize it as somewhat like a personal attack on their views, when that was never what I've been doing. I never said you shouldn't watch movies the way that I watch movies, or the opposite. But people do this, and then they express they're so disappointed in me for my worldview. And I just feel like that's an expression of anger I don't know if it was designed to make me feel bad. Well, if it was designed to make me feel like I did something wrong and I should change the way I consume media, then like I guess you succeeded in making me feel terrible. But then I also question like, why am I feeling terrible about this? Because it's my decision how I consume movies, and I don't know why it
Why that
hurts other
bothers you.
people so much. But here I am like getting upset and exhausted, and feeling burnt out from even putting innocuous opinions on the internet from something that like I try and do reality checks all the time. I'm forced to do reality checks all the time. Be like, does this matter? Is this a problem? And should I change because of it? And it's that constant questioning of like, am I doing the right thing? Should I just stop sharing opinions on what I think is innocuous things just because it might personally offend someone, or because I don't want to see their disappointment and it makes me feel bad? It's this constant question, like you, as a public figure, that you're asking yourself. And I think that lends to the burnout. It's not just about, it's not workload.
It's not really burnout
Yeah.
at all. It's just
It's
the mental health
Yeah.
consequences of being publicly judged constantly, because that's sort of the business this is, of putting yourself on the internet. You are the product, right? And yeah, I think the real mindfuck of it is like, how much of this is just people, the people who are mad about specific things like movies or travel are people who just like really love those things. And I think they just have an issue when it's like someone who doesn't have an appreciation for it, they do. I think that's a lot of where that comes from.
But like, I hear you, but I challenge you on that, because if like, I'm trying to think of an example. In real life, if I had a coworker who really loved plants and I like don't care about plants, am I going to go to their cube and say, "Ew, why do you have so many plants? I have no plants. You shouldn't have plants." No, I would never do that. And that's where I struggle, because I don't care if other people have opinions that aren't actually controversial or bad or harmful. Like, yes, there are opinions that are harmful. I'm not saying that there absolutely are. But when it's something like this that doesn't really impact your ability to watch movies or travel, your ability to have plans.
If we record a podcast talking about a topic, we're putting it out there for people to react to respond to.
People can say, you know what, I disagree with you because I love this and I do this. That's fine. Let me clarify. That's fine.
Yeah.
It's not those comments. It's not people just disagreeing.
I just want to be clear though, because like sometimes it's really tough to see the line again between that sort of legitimate feedback and criticism of saying like, Ben, you were ignorant about something in the podcast, or like, was I wrong about something? Do I have an ignorant opinion on something? Or do you just disagree with my opinion and you're somehow overreacting to that, right?
Or did you just miss something because we only talked about a particular Reddit post for 8 minutes? And had we been asked a specific question, we would have unpacked it more and been like, actually, yeah. Like, there's so many variables.
Yeah. And like, I don't know. I can only speak for myself. I'm not in the position you are. I feel like I'm pretty good at just like shutting my computer and like, I'm okay. But I'm not in your shoes and haven't been the sort of focal point of so many people's attention for like 7 years or however long you've been online now.
I feel like, I think Dan kind of touched on this too, that the longer you're online, the more people want from your personal life. And that's totally your decision as a creator to decide how much of it you do. But I decided to share more of my personal life by having a podcast, by streaming, because those mediums just lend themselves to having longer conversations. Obviously, we're going to talk more about like semi-serious things, not like totally always serious. But of course, more was going to come out. And that is always going to be a good and a bad thing. No matter how much of a good person, you know, with a good heart you are, someone is going to find an issue with something you say, even if it's not that controversial. And it's hearing the feedback on that and people expressing like, I thought you were educated, but it turns out you're stupid. Or like people breaking it down like that's upsetting, because it's like, I mean, I don't think that anything I say is really that harmful to another person in this world. Or at least I hope that it isn't. And I also, as a consumer of media and internet, when someone is saying they have an opinion that is not like mine, unless it's a like harmful to humanity opinion, I'm not talking about that. Okay. But just innocuous opinions, I don't feel the need to go fight them in the comments over it. And I guess that's where my frustration lies, because I don't identify with people who want to fight me in the comments. It's okay to express, I actually love this movie. I'm not saying that. It's the people who are kind of trying to tear me down and suggest, like, you're not the person I thought you were, or I don't know. It's like sentiments like that are like hurtful and that make me not want to put myself on the internet anymore. So I'm constantly like second guessing, like, should we even talk about
X topic?
About like something that doesn't sound bad, but like it could be interpreted as bad because there's 7 people out there who will tell me how disappointed they are in me as a person.
And this isn't a problem with like old school Simply videos where you edit it down to like 15 minutes. You're right. It's a product of just wanting, the reason you like streaming, right? You've talked about this, is more that it's like you have that audience interaction, more of that real feedback. Fun. But yeah, the double-edged sword of that is, yeah, you're having more like raw conversations. You're sometimes saying things you haven't completely thought about. It does open you up to more of that criticism too, right?
Yep. Or I make a bad joke and then I'm like, fuck. Like these things happen when you're just on the internet more. But I'm, I guess it's just dealing with it.
And we're talking about this like it's some ubiquitous thing. And I think it's more that like it can sometimes feel like that way more than it is that. Like we already talked about, the negative comments stand out way more than positive ones, unfortunately. But like to this day and through your whole time on the internet, you've had a pretty overwhelmingly positive relationship with the comment section.
Yes, and you're right. And it's always coming back to that and not forgetting that, because you don't want to focus on the negative. And I'm sure most of you listening out there are like, please don't do that, because you don't want me to stop the podcast. You don't want me to stop streaming. So I don't want to do that either. I'm just expressing that, like, it's incredibly frustrating, no matter who you are, even though you maybe perceive me as someone who is like able to discern, realistic feedback versus just like I should ignore it if it's not the majority. It doesn't matter. After so many years, it absolutely takes a toll, especially when you've already decided to just give more of yourself up online.
All right, are we still talking about the Dan video?
Yeah, I had other notes.
no, this got pretty. I guess a lot of what we've been saying is a lot of projecting about ourselves more so than Dan's video, which I guess is the point. I think we should at least touch on, in the second half of his video, he talks about his experience. So I guess the title of his video is Why I Quit YouTube, right? And so, yeah, a lot of it was sort of that toll it was taking on him. But I thought it was really interesting how he talked at one point about just like, I didn't want to make just videos of me sitting in front of my bed talking to a camera anymore, where I'm the guy doing the lighting, I'm the one pressing record on the camera, I'm the one editing the video. He clearly had ambitions to do more than that. He felt like he had done everything he wanted to do just as a quote unquote YouTuber, right? So he started talking about like wanting to write a show where, that it was like professionally done, and he wanted to write the script and he wanted to star in it and do all these things. And this is when YouTube Originals was still a thing. So he talks about his experience trying to get that show off the ground and how negative an experience it was. And he does accuse YouTube of being like really unprofessional in their dealings with him. I feel a little weird commenting. It would be weird not to acknowledge this aspect of his video at all if we're talking about it. But I also feel like really strange talking about it because we're hearing his side, and I feel like there's a lot of things he didn't say or left out that just makes it really hard to interpret that situation properly. Like he claims he worked on this show for months. They were kind of leading him on, like they were going to make it with him. And then eventually they sort of pulled out, said that wasn't the direction they were going in. And then shortly after that, YouTube Originals just stopped existing. YouTube doesn't make original content anymore. But like, I just found myself asking, like, at what point, like, was there or wasn't there a contract? I feel like there are a lot of things sort of left out of his explanation that made it really hard to interpret.
I don't think he was he spoke about it for 20 minutes to give people like an actual accounting of the events. Like that wasn't his goal. His
He
goal
gave
was,
a pretty detailed account of.
but it was only enough required to convey how he felt and what happened as
Okay.
an explanation for why he didn't post for 2 years. Because the premise was like he didn't post on his main channel for 2 years because he was working on a big show, presumably with YouTube Originals, that ultimately never happened. And so he just told as much as he needed to just like set that stage and explain it. He's obviously not going to get into if there was a contract signed, when it was signed, and the legality of it all. Yeah.
Okay, then I guess we don't need to get into that too much. Although he does sort of add that he felt like he was being asked to participate in YouTube events. And I guess he felt like he was just doing them in the hopes that that would help his show happen with them. Which, you know, if that was his experience, that's I guess his narrative, and that's fine.
Yeah, you could feel a bit used. Like I could see from the way he explained it how you would feel like, well, that's kind of not fair. He felt like he did a bunch of favors, like he was showing his commitment, those were his words, to YouTube by participating in these YouTube events where they take your face, they put it on a campaign and you're the face of it and you go speak to something or whatever.
Yeah. Most people don't look at those opportunities as being taken advantage of, though, right? Like you've been offered to participate in YouTube events and things before.
I went to Brandcast.
Yeah.
That's a YouTube event.
Well, there's other. I don't know.
can't
Usually, you probably can't talk about them too much. You've said no to quite a few, and there's never been this pressure like, oh, by saying no, we're gonna punish you or anything, or
no. But by saying no to some of these campaigns, they're probably less likely to ask you to do more of them in the future because they know you're not really interested. But that's fine with me because my motives or priorities wasn't to get my face out in places all the time, honestly.
Yeah, if your ambition is to be famous, being like the face of a YouTube campaign that they're going to promote across the platform is probably a good thing for a lot of people.
Right.
So I just felt it a little strange how he just like framed it as if like he was bending over backwards to help them by being featured in other campaigns they were doing.
I mean, I see both. Like, I do think it is kind of like YouTube does need its creators to show their faces on things so they can be like, hey, brands or other partners, look. Like, yes. But then also the creator does gain something from having their face on a billboard or being featured because it's just another thing for your fans to be like, oh my God. Or, you know, you could gain new fans through those mediums. So it's a little bit of both.
I get it. And maybe just to put a bookend in the Dan video, like I think it's very clear that video was made for his fans who have been wondering where he's been the last 2 years. It wasn't really made for like me, someone like me who isn't really someone who knows his
It
content.
was not made for you.
It's like a 90-minute video of him just talking about himself. Like I think an outside observer might find it a little self-indulgent, but I think really it's him giving a very comprehensive, lengthy explanation to the people who have been missing him and wondering where he's been, right?
And I think that's an interesting topic. Maybe we'll just like touch on that shortly. But before I do, I just wanted to say, just to wrap up the YouTube original stuff, I completely empathize with him that he felt like his dreams were shattered because, just to reiterate in case you didn't see the video, like he had written a script, he had a whole story and series that he thought he was going to make with YouTube. And then he felt like that opportunity just kind of died on the table and he was not able to do it. And he spent 2 years or however many years of his life stopping and preventing other opportunities in order to pursue this one. So anyone in his position would absolutely feel like, well, what the fuck? Like, why did I do all that? And it's extremely heartbreaking, especially when it was content that you were writing yourself. Like he was going to be, I guess, some like director, writer, and the star of it. At the same time, though, while he did say in his video that he knows it's not the people at YouTube like who didn't like him specifically, like they're just people who work there. I do want to just touch on in the traditional workforce, like thinking about, you know, if you're working on a project and all of a sudden the company changes directions, this just kind of happens to a lot of people. For example, like I've been told to write papers about certain topics on justice, but then like 3 months later, after I'd already started the lit review or started pulling data, I'm told that there's been a change in priorities, and now you're going to write about this, Cristine. Like, and I don't have a choice. That's just literally what it is. And I'm like, fuck, I just did so much work. Like, and I'm just like, I feel like I wasted my time. But, you know, it's frustrating, but ultimately, like, priorities with, departments, agencies, companies, corporations can have multiple different priorities and things that compete and shift and change. And as an employee, you just got to change along with them. And I feel like people, most of you or you in the future, will have worked in a company of some kind, whether it's large or small, where this just happens. And that experience can teach you that it's not all about you and your work, because it wasn't about the paper that I started writing that they didn't like. It was about the department just said, we're changing gears here. So this is your job now. And I think maybe Dan is just someone, like a lot of YouTubers, who don't necessarily have the same exposure to experience in working amongst others in companies of that nature, where it's bigger than just you. Because when you're a content creator, it is you usually. I mean, like, I'm not saying there's not teams of people who work on content, but the type of YouTuber we're talking about anyways, like the type of YouTuber like me, like just about me, it is about me, and I can change the priority, and it's up to me. But if I'm working with another company like YouTube, who's a giant company with multiple divisions and departments, and things change and priorities change and budgets stop and XYZ, it isn't just about me. And I think, like, while if I was in his position, I would absolutely be devastated that I'd lost all that time, and I'd probably express my disappointment to the team. I think I would internalize it to a different degree because of my experience working in a corporation, if you want to call it the government a corporation, but like in some capacity with others in a workforce, that this is just kind of what happens. And I think maybe that's kind of a distinction that some people listening to Dan may have interpreted differently, because they may have experience working in companies where they're told to change directions all the time, potentially.
If what he's describing about the way that sort of relationship was going is true, it sounds like there was at least unprofessionalism on the side of the people he was dealing with.
He said, like, it sounds like there was very poor communication.
Yeah, poor communication is a good way of putting it. But yeah, no one owes you the opportunity to make a TV show about yourself, right? And it did kind of feel like that was sort of being portrayed as this big injustice, that like the show wasn't going to happen. It's like, if you are your creator and your own boss, and you can put up the money yourself and do that yourself, then yeah, it's totally in your control what you're going to do. But if you're expecting another company to put up all the money, I assume some sort of contract may or may not have existed that would sort of stipulate what rights the both parties have to, you know, ownership of the IP, or who was responsible for what, or who got to say, like, we're backing out of this project. Like, that's just, these bigger productions involve those things. And you're right. I think people like him and you are less used to working in an atmosphere, in a media sort of company atmosphere, where there are all those competing factors.
Yeah, I don't have experience working in media production, obviously. I just meant like I had experience in a workforce where there's multiple people above me, and I have bosses and other coworkers, and they tell me I got to change papers, so I do. And that's just kind of what it is. I don't personalize it, or you try not to. I mean, I'm not going to say you're not annoyed. Sure,
but on the YouTube side, like, one of the main reasons you've always sort of stayed independent, no managers, no external editors or anything in like your years making main channel simply Nailogical content. It was never relying on anyone else, and it was never like, it was purely like your sort of self-expression, I think.
Yeah, I was reluctant to seize the opportunity, so to speak, to get a manager and really like put my face out there in multiple places, because I don't know, it wasn't really maximal fame that I was after. So I failed to optimize my channel. It's true. It's true, but it's just what I wanted. It's just what I felt like doing. And this also, maybe we'll just end this conversation here. The reason why Dan posted that video was in part an explanation to his fans who had missed him for 2 years.
Yeah.
And so he wanted to explain why he was gone, and then that whole YTO thing that didn't come through was a huge factor into why he was gone. And then he felt like a lot of guilt in explaining it now because it never happened, which I totally get and sympathize with. I'm getting similar comments for different reasons from my audience. Like, where are you? You haven't posted a video in so long. Are you dead? Like, I literally get those comments sometimes. And someone on Twitter, like I retweeted it not that long ago, said like, where are you? I've literally not seen you for 3 months. And I'm like, I'm literally here and there and here. And like, here's some evidence. I'm just not where you're looking. And
You're not making the content
Yeah.
some of them want you to be making.
right. But that's not the same thing as where are you? You don't exist anymore. And just think, if you're me and you're making hours of content a week on multiple different locations or platforms, and then someone says like, where are you? Are you basically dead? It's like, no, you're just choosing to not look at me where I want to be, which can be a hurtful comment that I don't think people realize.
Yeah, and it's not like they have to like what you're doing now.
Yeah, that's fine.
There's no obligation
But
for
it's
you
like
to...
this accusing me of like, why'd you quit? You're dead. What's going on? And it's like, what do you mean quit?
Those comments are strange. Yeah.
I changed what I'm doing. I'm doing a lot, and there are a lot of people who love this podcast, who love my stream, who follow Holo Taco on TikTok, or just like know that I'm working all the time on Holo Taco stuff. Like you guys, you see some of it, not all of it, but
yeah, there's people who would like you just to make content like you were making 5 years ago, and
it's kind of like you made a really good analogy that I'm gonna steal. You said when people go to a concert and the band's been around for 10 years and the people in the crowd just start screaming at the band to play one of their OG hits from like 8 years ago, and the band just wants to play their new music. I am the band, and I feel like people haven't listened to any of my new stuff. They don't care. They just say they don't care about my new stuff. They're just screaming at me to play my old stuff, but I'm not my old stuff anymore.
yeah. So like if you went to a concert and someone was yelling out that song, maybe that would be... I wouldn't blame that person for doing it like once or twice. If we're halfway through the set and every time there's a song break, they're yelling out Freebird again, at a certain point, it's kind of on you to realize you, the person yelling that, is being the asshole.
Am I the asshole?
Are you
However,
the asshole?
the person yelling that, just like the people telling me to post main channel videos about whatever, we don't care, just make them like your old stuff. Those people don't always mean bad, and I think for the most part they don't realize that what they're saying like is I'm interpreting negatively. I don't think they know that, and so I'm not trying to antagonize them at all. I think they think like they're doing me a favor by saying we miss this specific type of content. Can you just do it because they like it? Just like you might really like a song from a band and you're calling the band out. But it's even if one individual isn't repeating that comment 10 times, like the same person at the concert, if 20 different people from different parts of the stage are saying the same thing, even only once, it feels like to the artist on stage that so many people are saying it. And then it has that compounding effect of making them feel bad for changing, for doing what they like now, and feeling bad for not being the old Simply. And that is another component of like this kind of mental health, I guess, if that's what it is, struggle. That it's like people constantly asking me to not change.
It's because like the content is you though. Because if this was just someone saying like if you made videos where sometimes you bake and sometimes you play video games, and there was a lot of comments being like, I want to see more baking, that probably wouldn't bother you or feel offensive to you, right? It is more about like how you post at all, or these comments that are more like intrinsically about you as a person and your values. That is the issue, right? I worry that my biggest concern with like being on the internet is sort of losing perspective on what is or isn't reasonable. And we are putting stuff online, when you're putting stuff online, I don't think it's reasonable to not expect people to express opinions about it. And there's ways of expressing that are respectful or not respectful, but I just worry, like, how do you draw the line between comments that you just sort of internalize as hate comments or whatnot, or just being, being able to accept that that comment is just someone expressing an interest or a preference in something I could be doing, but I'm choosing not to.
Yeah, and I have to undergo that exercise every time I read the comment section. And I guess doing that every day gets exhausting, to be honest. Like, most people never deal with this. Most people don't have hundreds of comments, thousands of comments every time they do something. And yes, I read them because I love this community and I'm always liking
comments. Have you ever thought
comments.
about not reading the comments?
No, because I love this community and I love seeing that there's so many positive comments. I like interacting with them. It gives me feedback, something we can make a joke of. I want to see what they found funny and found interesting. So no, I'm not just going to shut off the comments. That has never been like, oh, I'm just fuck everyone. Like, I don't want to do that because I feel like I want the value of the positive feedback and the people who enjoy everything I do, it should be weighed much higher than the smaller proportion of people who I feel make more hurtful comments. And it's not comments, for just to be extremely clear, it's not comments that are expressing a different opinion of mine that hurt me. It's comments that aim to tear me down for my opinions that I find upsetting, that express personal disappointment with my values in some form that are upsetting. And then also just the influx and compounding effect of comments telling me to stop streaming. There's literally comments from people saying they hate my streams. Like, the word hate has been used. And like, that makes me really sad because I love it and I love everyone who comes to hang out with me. So I have to just accept that it's fine that someone hates my stream. Like, it's fine. They won't come then. But it's just one of hundreds of comments that I read that doesn't always make me feel good. Like, it's really hard to move past that when there's a lot of it that is different, even if it's a small proportion overall. So it's just like that's been hard over time to deal with. And maybe that's just the thing. And maybe that's why so many YouTubers make videos like the one Dan made, is that eventually this isn't for you anymore. Eventually your whole life has been like on public trial and you can never make everyone happy. And while you've told yourself, it's impossible to make everyone happy, few people can endure that for so long.
Yeah. So enjoy it while you can.
No, that sounds so depressing. I just want to be like really honest. And as a result of being really honest, I'm going to get people expressing negative disappointment with me in some way. I'm certain that's going to happen, just as it always does. I'm sure there's something we missed that when I read the comments, I'm going to be like, fuck, I should have elaborated on that, or I said that the wrong way. You're absolutely right. Or had I had a chance, I would have said this a different way. And that's also really frustrating to me.
I think just any time, too, someone in a position as privileged as we are,
says anything to complain.
A lot of success, a lot of money. Anytime you complain about anything, there will just be people like, yeah, I feel like we've offered the sort of caveats and everything we need to. Yeah. That was a weird one.
I just...
You okay?
Yeah, I'll be fine. Just to go back to Dan, though, like, I really do feel for him, and I hope that he's doing well and doing better. And that if he does choose to make content, if he chooses to make content, that it's content that he made because he enjoyed it and he wanted to. And I'm sure whatever he does, his fans will enjoy it. Do you remember, like, back in 2016 when all of my comments were Dan and Phil stuff?
There were a lot of those comments.
I can't get out of my mind. Like, do you remember Pro Tip? Like, I don't even know what that was a reference to.
I still don't know what that means.
I still don't know what it means. I don't know if it's bad. Like, but people would write Pro Tip all the time in my comments on my videos, and their profile picture would be like a picture of Dan and Phil, or like their names would be like Dan and Phil forever, or Dan and Phil Stan, Stan and Phil, or I don't know. But there was just like a wave of comments related to their fan base, which is kind of what he talked about in the beginning of his video. So I saw that firsthand, just being on the receiving end of those comments that were all related to him, which is fine. Like, it's funny.
Well, I remember the irony of that was, like, at that time, you had a lot of fans about your
holo.
nail polish, talking about holo stuff. And occasionally we'd find like other small nail art accounts saying really mean things about you because they felt like your fans were not being respectful in their comment sections. And we were like, we thought about it. Like, is this something that like is your responsibility in any way? And around that same time, like you're getting a bunch of pro tip comments in your section that are kind of like ignoring your content. Like those aren't meaningful comments.
No, it's just like
It's basically getting spam from another
Yeah.
creator's community, but it's like, didn't really bother you.
But
So
it
just-
didn't bother me because I was a bigger creator. But if I was a smaller account, I would have been annoyed. So I do
think so?
understand. Yes. So I understand the smaller nail art accounts who took that more personally than I did because like I know that this is just shit on the internet. And I even made fun of the pro tip stuff in one of my videos.
Oh, okay.
I remember like screenshotting it and being like, oh, you guys are just going to write pro tip all over my videos. But like I made a joke out of it because it just is what it is.
Yeah.
But I had experience enough at that point to understand this is just what happens with fandoms. I was starting to learn that. Whereas a smaller nail art account, like you were saying, like maybe didn't and just took that more personally and negatively. So I do understand how that could have happened.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll see people next Taco Tuesday, maybe.
Yes.
How do you want to end this?
I just want to end this by saying thank you to everyone who has left nice feedback, who's been there, who's not left any feedback too. I know that
silent
the
majority.
silent majority. Yeah, exactly. Let's put that in perspective. Most people say nothing.
Yeah.
Isn't that good? Shout out to the people who say absolutely nothing. I appreciate you. No, I'm just kidding.
I do
Guys,
appreciate
I am
it.
okay. I really don't want people to misinterpret this as like me not being okay. I'm fine. This is the natural course of what anyone naturally in my position would deal with. I'm just telling you about it. That's the only difference.
Okay.
Yeah. So thanks so much for watching. And we'll see y'all later.
Yeah,
Bye.